that I am live. Welcome, this is Tokyo Tonight. Yes, I upgraded from Windows 7 to Windows 10. I'm like the last person in the world to do that this week. I was afraid of breaking all of my settings, which I just discovered I did. Wasn't as bad as I thought, but every setting in this capture was off. It was like picking up the wrong monitors, that was using the wrong microphone. So I was just rejigging the whole setup, as you may have noticed. It's a feature of the show that I perform ongoing technical maintenance while I'm doing the live stream. And yes, managed to do it all pretty quick. So good to see you all. Mr. Quarty Chap, you're eating dinner. That's pretty late to be eating dinner. Let's go through and see who's here in the comments. And this week there are a lot of topics, so I will try to move quickly. Great to see again. I know I put the notice up for the link and everything for this at the very last minute, so always awesome to see so many people rock on in, including Doob. Good to see you, Doob. And I think I recognize your handle if it's Justin Doob. I think I've seen it before anyway, so good to see you there in the comments, as well as Papa Power. I am the IC guy, so I call myself loudly. Sometimes I call for religious support, but mostly it's just myself. Mr. Quarty Chap, excellent to see you. Steve from Berkeley, damn straight. It's a technical feature of the show, not a technical issue. Well said, Mr. Andrew Moorboy. Good to see you. Won't stay long tonight. I've been a busy weekend. Well, I'm glad to hear that you've had a busy weekend. I hope everything's cool there in Victoria. I will do my best to just help you get to sleep as I do. Quint Racket, good to see you. Doesn't have a cat. I don't quite understand what you mean by that, but nonetheless, good to see you there, Quint Racket. Who else we got in here? We've got there is a butter story tonight. So there are butter issues later on. It looks like, I mean, again, Google censors like every icon except the triggering one. So the AI doesn't understand me at all. Who else we got? Odi Jr., Baba Boom, good to see you. We've got Akuhe, greetings to you, Akuhe, good to have you in here. Fadek85, hi, right back at you, Fadek85, that's a handle name I don't recognize, so good to have you here in the chat. We've got Subaru the car, and a damn fine car it is too. I think I say this every week. Subarus are really underappreciated cars, so I quite like that handle name. Well done. A Devoid, hello from Arizona. Good to have A Devoid from Arizona. Hope you're doing okay there in Arizona. Got Dave Hunter, Ohio. Is it Ohio? You're like in West Australia, aren't you? So I guess you're about the same time as us, roughly. Maybe a bit behind us, even. New name, same red. Well, there we go. Doob, good to have you here. Odie Jr., boom, 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 boom. Love explosions. Love it. We've got Ogatun. Hello from Osaka. Good to have you joining us. Ogatun, another handle name I don't recognize. Always good to have someone new. Great to have you joining from Osaka, indeed. I'm jealous of the food that you're having down there. Tokyo 503, good to see you. It is indeed cooling down in Tokyo, although I'm in denial. This is something that New Zealanders do. I remember going down to New Zealand in the middle of winter, like having lived in Japan a few years when I was going back to go past the bar exam. And in Christchurch, where it gets pretty cold, I'm from the north of the country. Remember, southern hemisphere, so north is warmer. So going down to Christchurch, I remember in like the 5 degrees, there are people in shorts and singlets. Just total denial, but it's what people do. We psychologically impose the weather we wish we had. Ahmed, also good to see you. Indeed, smash the likes. Thank you, Ahmed. And excellent as always to have you here. Ease of a few restrictions from tomorrow, and tonight's the last day of overnight curfew. Well, that's good news from Victoria. Very glad to hear that. Ready for the butter, indeed. Lee Stayo, excellent to see you again. Travis, more excellent to see you. Tai Nakamura, good to see you, sir. Good to have you here in the comments. We've got butter. We've got musical notes. We've got it all. And Raz Al Ghul. I think the setup is now complete with Raz Al Ghul saying, "Let the games begin." So let's dive in. Plenty to talk about this week. Some people may have noticed I actually did a stream the other day. In fact, it's actually the second live stream I've done with JJ Walsh. There is a link in here, but if you just search up on YouTube or on Twitter, just JJ Walsh, WALSH. I think that's her handle name. You'll be able to find her live stream. She interviews an amazing like 5 people per week or something crazy. She's gotten in a few months up to like over 100 interviews. And she noticed she wanted to talk about like sustainability related news in the Japan news, which I always am interested in, and it was kind of nice to just pick a subject. It surprised me to learn that I could talk about a niche for an hour completely comfortably with room to spare, and we did that. We're going to do that every month from now on. So one, if you want to see more of this, if you can take more of me, once a month I'll be doing a live stream going forward for now with JJ Walsh. And yeah, she's like really close to, is it 500? I think close to 500 subscribers, which is like a goal that she has. So go do me a favor. By doing her a favor, go subscribe. She's actually got, it's not all environmental stuff. It's actually, she's got some great, I think I've plugged her before on here. So as you know, she's got some great interviews on there. Ones that I really enjoyed were the ones with Matt Elt and the guy from Kotaku, Brian Ashcroft, as well as a bunch of other interviews, and now with me as well. So if you want to catch up more content, I talked a lot of news with her midway through this week, or actually on Friday. So that's a good channel to check out. And yeah. So anyway, let's dive into the topics that we have, and we'll see how we go. One thing I noticed actually watching the recording back from last week, the Google auto captioning is getting quite good. Hey, Milchman, good to see you. It's actually getting really accurate, which is kind of funny because I mumble and I have not really a real New Zealand accent anymore. It's not really any sort of an accent. It's not American, but it's not New Zealand. But it's just the result of being away from New Zealand for 22 years and needing everyone to understand what I say, but still kind of mumbling. I was shocked. Two things I realized was, one, it was surprisingly accurate now. I mean, the Google, the YouTube auto captioning used to be garbage. It's now really good. One, I realized it was really good. The second thing I realized was, I think the entire hour, I actually say the whole show was one sentence, and it made me feel like, well, you can tell it's not scripted because otherwise I would have sentences. Made me feel like I should try to make things easier for the robot. So I don't know, maybe that's the challenge for today. The challenge for today is to see if I can generate really good captions by speaking in sentences and speaking clearly. I'm going to raise the microphone up closer. I'm going to go into radio mode. Let's see how we go with this. This should be fun. Oh, indeed, Shodai on winning the sumo tournament. Great to see new sumo wrestlers coming up. It's not in my covered topics this week. But yes, the Tobizaru and Shodai, two up-and-coming young sumo wrestlers, and they put on a great show. So well deserved indeed the win, and the Kanto show. I think Tobizaru, who's new in the Makunuchi ranks, he did super well, was very entertaining, and he got a special award as well. So yeah, good stuff, Razel. Good call. Into the topics. First topic, it's an oldie but a goodie. There are more discussion this time from Nikkei Shimbun about how it's making less and less sense for businesses to have their headquarters all concentrated in Tokyo. My opinion on this is that, apart from the fact I'm a fan of Tokyo, and I think Tokyo is awesome because there's so much aggregation here, I have pointed out that, yes, indeed, if people, given that the government's trying to encourage things like remote working and remote working infrastructure, it does open up the possibility that, the downside of working in Tokyo, the upside is that everyone is here and everything is here. The downside is that you pay a premium for that. You pay extra rent. You have to pay, food, cost of living is just higher. Truth is, there are a lot of jobs that you can do remotely, a lot of jobs you can't do remotely, but I'm fortunate to be in a job where I can work remotely. And yeah, why should I have to do it from Tokyo? There's a legitimate question. If I could do it from my house here, if I haven't been into the office in 6 months, and all I need is a high-speed internet connection, why couldn't I do it in Karuizawa? Why couldn't I do it in the mountains in Nagano or in Fukuoka or in Okinawa, where I could enjoy a cheaper cost of living, better food, better environment for the family, and I could my income would go further. So from a personal perspective, I think there is great potential actually for this idea of avoiding this aggregation in cities. There again, I'm a believer actually in terms of my science fiction cyberpunk aspirations. I think it's actually the concentration of people in cities, the urbanization of people. One, it's good for the environment. having people spread over, the whole country, chopping trees and forests down to set up farms and towns. I think that concentration is good for human culture, it's good for collaboration, and it's actually good for the environment to the extent that, it's crazy. Japan has more forest than New Zealand has. Japan and New Zealand are about the same size. New Zealand has less than 5 million people. Japan has over 120 million people. Japan has more forest because it's more densely populated. Also, truth be told, Japan is actually a lot more rugged, the geology. So you could argue, while I still think that the idea of having places like Tokyo, what make Japan and what make Tokyo special is the fact that it's so concentrated. Certainly, I think there is something happening all over the world that both corporate headquarters with local governments, basically everywhere outside of Japan is losing population except Tokyo, and they're losing population both due to people not having babies and for the babies that are getting born growing up and saying, "Wow, this place sucks," and moving to Tokyo. Given that politics is at least partially geographically representative, people want to save their towns by figuring out how to encourage business to move to them from Tokyo. I think people should be able to live where they want, but certainly I think that the equation as to the benefits of living and working remotely have changed. And I don't think it necessarily should be moving a corporate headquarters like they're talking about here, moving a whole office and a whole concentration of people and lifting them out of a convenient big city into an inconvenient rural town. But I think it should be that we should allow workers who want to go and live in an inconvenient rural town, but for lifestyle reasons, give them that choice, but without just shifting the problems of having a big concentrated office. Allow people to work remotely. JZM, good. By the way, I see more comments in here. So Nissan R33 Z Tune, good to see you. Kodos, I don't mind which account you're logged in. Good to see you. Dan H, excellent to see you as well. Jays M, excellent to have you here in the comments, and everybody else. By the way, remember, say hello when you're joining. But as always, the government's trying to crack the code for how to get people to move. I think the idea is to actually allow individual people to live wherever the hell they want, and not tie them to having to commute to offices. And that could be part of the big digitization initiative, which I'm going to be talking about. Christopher Luke, excellent to see you. Christopher Luke, I think you're right. I think that's part of what we're learning. I think it's great to have the option to be able to work for a couple of months a year, for example, remotely if you want to. And I think when we get into things like the 4-day work week, which I think is going to become standard with more automation and AI, I think there are different ways to work. But certainly what I missed the most from the last 6 months is, I miss that collaboration. I work on a global team where I do actually work, I guess remotely from a lot of people that I work with, but I miss working with the people that I work with in the same office. And I agree. There again, a slowdown in creativity, there's an opportunity for us to pivot and learn. Done well, you could have enhanced creativity, but right now there are still too many barriers to that. So, fax machines and Hankos are definitely one thing that slow down creativity as well. So, anyway, an old chestnut. Speaking of which, this was another one that just came up today, actually, another Nikkei article. Actually, some really, really interesting, I hope it still displays the whole article in here. There's some really interesting stats in here that show retail. Japan is the blue line down the bottom. So basically, this is as a... compared to 2019, Japan has actually had a bigger decline in retail than OECD average and the listed countries of UK, Germany, and USA. So there's been a bigger, in spite of the fact the recession year hasn't come out that deep, it looks a lot deeper. People have certainly started spending less and have reacted more to the shutdown. I guess a big part of this is that a lot of spending in Japan is associated with, I'm saving tons of money because I would commute, I would buy my lunch at work, I would buy my food on the way home. Normally I'd buy dinner on the way home, and maybe I'd shop on the way home, and I'd go through major hub stations, and that would allow me to do it. So just not moving just means I'm not spending, and I'm going to the supermarket and making food at home more. So that's probably a part of it, but certainly Japan is spending a lot less. And again, while cash is continuing to go up, expenditure is just nosedive this year. And there's and this was super interesting. You take all of these countries that the share of people, the percentage of people who did not shop online in the last year. So although in Japan, of course, you have Amazon and Rakuten and Yahoo Shopping, and there are some big online retail sites. And for people who do, and I use online supermarkets. Ito Yokodo is a great online supermarket, and there's a couple of services like this that offer online supermarket shopping and so on as well. So there are people who are definitely living their whole lives on online shopping, but they're still more than 15%, more than in Canada, France, Italy, Germany, UK. Where those societies, including presumably elderly people, have transitioned and are commonly buying things online. In Japan, there's a big share of people who have never shopped online still. And so there's speculation from the government that this correlates, that the lack of people shopping online is corresponding to the lack of spending in the economy and is worsening the economic downturn in the retail sectors. And what drives me crazy is when you have 80-year-old politicians trying to come up with the solutions for this. Thanks, Raz. I probably need it, actually, to go through. What drives me crazy about this is that the government, when you have 80-year-old people trying to figure out how to get people to spend more money, instead of trying to force companies and provide infrastructure and support for small businesses to getting their businesses online, and making them easier for people to shop during lockdowns. Instead of that, they're having to go to travel, go to eat. They're having these campaigns of trying to encourage people to physically travel to places, which is good in its own way. But basically, rather than try to fix the problems of so much of the economy still running based on cash, and so much of the economy still not connected except for the people who can actually walk all the way out to their neighborhoods and discover their places, which relies on tourism. It relies on people exploring, which is a wonderful thing to do. But to rely on that for a steady income, the lost potential from lack of digital retail economy in Japan. This shows how the penetration here is still, Japan is still not a high-tech country in many, many ways. And there's a lot of lost opportunity to help a lot of businesses out and to rescue the economy. And this shows that, like other things, the government's just not thinking. They're thinking about old-fashioned solutions that are really difficult in a pandemic to implement, when there are solutions where, what has happened is it looks like online digital retail has advanced and those companies are doing well. And, we should be helping people who don't have access to that economy to get into that. So, yeah, I agree with the conclusion of this Nikkei article that this is something that, not just within administration, within the government, but through the whole economy. Japan really needs to focus on helping people, helping elderly people, helping, help those little agricultural, fruit and veg shops, help them get connected with logistics companies and so on, so that they can deliver stuff online, and get more people from all over the country to find their stuff and buy it. The other thing is, Raz, I don't know what you're talking about, but we'll show the comment. That's fine. The other thing is that I remember seeing that things like for example, there are suppliers, like in Chiba, there was a news story featuring a farm that was producing all of this food for school cafeterias. And because all the schools are shut down, they had all of this food, and they didn't have any other suppliers. They weren't connected to the supermarket chains or anyone to buy up all of their produce. So they were trying to sell it beside the side of the road, but they basically weren't able to sell most of these fresh vegetables that they were growing. So they were throwing it all out. They were composting it all, like, hundreds of thousands of dollars worth. And this is happening all over the country in lots of different ways when these supply chains are disrupted. And again, I'm sitting here in Tokyo thinking, if you're like composting all of these beautiful, fresh picked veggies that are just like 50 kilometers away from Tokyo, someone make these people a web page. There'll be people who will buy it just because it's fresh and they know it's from a farm that's nearby and it's good. So not just a Japan issue, of course, but it is a big issue in Japan that there's all of this lost opportunity. More people rocking in. I definitely want to say hello to Shubas. Good to have Shubas from Panama joining us. Yahoo Mail works great. I'm glad to hear that. Temiko, good to see you. And it is kind of sad, but nice to have. Long time no see, Temiko, actually. Excellent to have you there in the comments. I'm just going to go back. Remember, as always, by the way, if you want to get my attention at Mark Eco Simon, you can see it flashes orange to me. I will try to say hello back. You can also request a comment or a topic or something like that. In fact, let's quickly check the comments that we've had. $5,000 fine if people want to have parties in Victoria. That is a bit of a buzzkill. Congrats to Shodai. You saw that one before. Speaking, same living in Europe. JZM started speaking English instead of Kiwi. Yeah, I can definitely relate to that, JZM. It was a bit of a culture shock going back, both for getting used to Kiwis talking again, which I kind of liked, but it's just something I don't hear very often. So I even when I hear it, like New Zealand accents, like I was on a conference call at work the other day, and there was a New Zealander on the call, and it was like the first New Zealander I'd heard in months. So I'm like, I'm checking, like, wait for the eyes. Oh, it's a Kiwi. It was kind of exciting, but it is funny, isn't it? 3 vowels. Well, you've actually had to, you've expanded a lot beyond me. It's mostly is and isn't it? Very good. Who else is in here? Sergeant Bilko, excellent to see you. Good to join. New Zealand has more farms than it needs, but does Japan have enough to feed itself? Well, it does pretty well. We're going to get to that. I've talked about Japan's agricultural policy before, but yeah. Dan H, Wi-Fi, remote working, why on earth, why even work on Earth but space? Hey, you're way ahead of me. It's probably safer, more privacy as there is infinite space. Sounds like a win to me. I'm all for working in space. That's my plan, actually. I was kind of hoping by this point I would be able to live on a space station. I'm not there, although I must admit I'm using the pandemic as an opportunity to imagine that, thinking of what space is actually like. It's basically like dust boot. It's basically like living in a U-boat or something like that. It's actually all recycled air and recycled farts and crappy food and, although excellent scenery. Living in an actual apartment with breathable air where you can open the window and go for a walk if you need to is much, much better than space. But I want to live in space, so I'm with you, Dan H. Thank you for the Red Bull, Razel. Good, much appreciated. Good night, Andrea, my boy. Have a good night. And Degins Konto, excellent to see you, by the way. Good to see so many people rocking in and leaving comments. Easy to catch if it's sleeping. Yeah. You don't annoy me on Twitter a lot. Don't worry about it. You're in New Zealand, right? So you are 4 hours ahead. So it is very, very... It's like 3 o'clock in the morning. So I am impressed. But did he scream a fellow Kiwi? There's a few fellow Kiwis in here, which is a good thing. Yeah. So moving on to the next topics. This Monday. We had 2 public holidays this week. I've been here 22 years. I still can't remember all the holidays. Japan has the most. I think Japan has the most public holidays of any country in the world. The old story is it's because people can't take vacations, so the government kind of forces it they keep adding public vacations. The other thing is, of course, you get a vacation based on the birthday of emperors when they pass away. So they're slowly increasing as well. But this week we had 2. We had, I think, National Foundation Day, the establishment of the Nation Day, as well as on Monday we had Respect for the Elderly Day. Japan, awesome, not only having Mother's Day and Father's Day, but also Children's Day and Respect for the Elderly Day. They actually cover everything. And it kind of, like, when you have them, it makes sense. And it's a day that the news looks upon all of the issues associated with, all the challenges that those people are facing. And right now in Japan, of course, is going through what the rest of the world is going through, but in its own way, more extremely. Japan is going through a rapidly aging society. The combination, people who are aging fast and they are living the longest in the world. Japan has the highest life expectancy for women and I think for men. And this is where there is a retirement age set for 65. But where for like the average woman, that's nearly 20 years of, okay, what do I do now? And they can collect a pension, which probably I'm not going to be able to collect. So it raises a lot of just challenges when you have so many people living longer, which is a great thing. But there's a question of how does the nation support those people on pensions when they're 28.7% of the population, 36.17 million retired people in Japan, 65 or more. And what's good for them as well. So, wholesale and retail employs 1.6 million elderly workers, but there are 36.17 million elderly. So there's a huge pool of people here that, of course, it's great if they live on their pensions and they're comfortable on that. But again, you talk about what's happening with digitization and the digital economy being able to level work in terms of, so long as you have a brain and you can are familiar with a computer interface, obviously, things like training can be a little bit of a challenge, but there again, what's happening with technology at the moment is the white balance just changed. I've got to freeze the white balance on this. Doesn't matter. I actually look like I have color now. That's a good thing. What's happening with IT at the moment that I really love is that a lot of technology is going into IT, things like coding and programming and AI engineering and so on, that where it used to be that you'd need all of these sort of certifications and qualifications and years of university study to be able to do certain sort of programming and engineering tasks. Now that technology is being used to make that more accessible and more natural language, there are it's actually the no-code movements. There are all of these movements, both aimed like Scratch for kids, but also most large IT companies are sort of working on developing codeless development, where literally you can develop a program like a person would if I went to a programmer and I was saying, I want a program that does this, and I want it to do this, and I want it to have this, and the engineer might say, well, what do you want it to do when it does this? And oh, that's a good question, it should do this. Like a human conversation, there's a trend in IT towards basically natural language based program development. As well as a ton of required IT work. Like, for example, AI is all driven by basically huge data sets of human inputted basic data, like how do people drive? Is this a hot dog? Is this not a hot dog? It's a lot of repetitive work that is really valuable in the economy. And I got on thinking about, well, there's all of these people who are living in, if they want to have a 20-year vacation, good on them. That's wonderful. But thinking, one, maybe some of them want to earn some extra money, or they want to be able to keep contributing to the economy. And second of all, anticipating that for people like myself, that I'm probably not going to have a pension, and we've got to figure out how to allow these people to earn a living. And I've got to figure out how to earn a living myself when I retire. I actually am super optimistic that there is, in the field of IT, which is where I work close to at the moment, there's going to be so many more opportunities for elderly to participate just the same as anyone else in the economy, basically. And all of this work where we don't have, particularly in Japan, where there is a shortage of young people and the value of those young people, as well as the whole problems with the wage seniority and so on, and how elderly people, even when they can work, are kind of forced out for cost-saving purposes. I think Japan has a real challenge to figure out how to change that, to find ways to keep elderly engaged, that they're happy and feeling rewarded and fulfilled. But also, where are they most useful in the economy? In Japan, you'll notice all of the elderly people directing cars in car parks and supermarkets, and acting as greeters in department stores and so on. There's a lot of sort of kind of menial tasks like that, but where people know that these jobs exist, and it is nice that that these jobs are available for people who want to supplant their pensions. But the fact is, there are whole parts of the economy at the moment that need lots of people. In Japan, they need people that speak Japanese, because this is a problem. A lot of AI training, you need Japan for things like language-based recognition, for being able to recognize what text is saying and recognize patterns in text. You need people who basically have time and can sit down and do this. And this is the thing, when you have a shortage of young people, you don't have a lot of young people who have the time to do this sort of thing. So I got on a big kick on Monday thinking about this issue and thinking, you know what? I mean, I think there's actually a huge opportunity for IT companies or startups to actually go around to retirement homes, teach people, basically create interfaces that are friendly for learning for elderly to be able to pick up and connect them with IT companies that need people to do things like AI training, and train the elderly in these places if they're interested, to get a bit of extra income by helping to train these sort of AIs, which are the things that are going to be driving our cars, reading books and news and so on for us, and making our lives a lot easier. You're going through medical journals and so on, looking at x-rays. Again, appropriate people in the appropriate fields, but a lot of the build up to that sort of AI is based on basic stuff that anyone can do. It's just finding people to do it. So I don't know. I'm super optimistic that you can have you've got, for a country that has a labor shortage, and where it's assumed that most of those 36 million people that are not working in Japan right now, only 1.7 out of those 36 million are working. they don't need to be in construction. They don't need to be doing heavy lifting or anything like that. There's a huge explosion of jobs that are associated with young people and startups. But if you could bridge the gap to make those jobs accessible to people, both as creative opportunities and just ways that they could just support the needed manpower in those jobs, I think there's actually a huge opportunity both for the people who set up the businesses to enable that and for fulfillment for the elderly people. So I don't know. I think it's a really great opportunity for everybody if someone can figure out how to crack the code on it. And the code is digitization. It's not just improving retail. It's not just speeding up government. It's actually helping these old people. And this is what I think about because this is a big part of my life. So anyway, good to see more people there in the comments, by the way. Red value, NLP in Japanese is super duper challenging. Well, again, and it's natural language processing. It's challenging because there just isn't enough. There are not a lot of great data sets out there because those data sets require a lot of human input. And unlike where the US can go and pay students in India to go and do huge data sets on language and English, and on whether photo objects are hot dogs or not. In Japan, there are not as many people that you can do to go and sort through Japanese for them. So that's the challenge. Quint Ranked, I still want to know what happens when all this AI stuff understands the tax code and can give good advice. Well, again, I presume that's going to be there should be an arms race on for that, both among the accounting companies to be able to automate providing tax advice, to be able to give that efficiently, that they want to sell it. But of course, when that happens, then it's going to be the same for legal advice. It's going to be the same for other things as well. When you're going to suddenly democratize professions that are based on special knowledge. All of this stuff, your taxes, you're writing contracts, you're getting medical advice, getting someone to help you with technical issues when you're trying to start the live stream. This should all just fix itself by AI, and all of these things. What happens? I think it'll be super interesting that when everybody starts tax optimizing, of course, that's going to affect tax revenue, and they're going to have to figure out new ways to generate tax. But remember as well, the thing about the tax code is often, there are two motivations behind the way that countries develop tax codes. One is they want to collect money. So sometimes they're just targeting. They look at what does everyone do and, I want a cent from that. But the other thing that they try to do when they talk about things like tax breaks and incentives, which is how a lot of big companies are structured to minimize their tax exposures, it's by fostering behaviors that the government wants to promote. So for example, the Japanese government used to give tax breaks to banks that turned off their ATMs at 3 p.m. because they wanted people to keep cash in the banks, which was stupid, and they stopped it in 1999. But it was always ridiculous to me in the 1990s when I came to Japan, and the ATMs were all switched off, and they were doing that for tax reasons. So again, you've actually got this fantastic tool that if everyone is using AI optimized tax, advisors, that's actually a way that governments can actually, provide incentives for a whole bunch of behaviors, charitable behaviors or, doing things that the country wants to promote. And people can decide, well, do I want to save some money and do a good thing? Or do I want to, am I willing to pay the cost for the convenience? So I don't know. I actually think that AI-enabled tax is absolutely one of the things that's going to happen. Same with my own profession. And I love the fact that it'll mean that good tax advice won't be something that you need to be a big company going to a big accounting company to get. Anyone will be able to get it. I think it's going to be awesome, actually. Day and age, most of the more economically countries are rapidly catching Japan up, and Japanification problems, stagnant growth, pension, all of that. Indeed, well, that's right. The Japan problems are definitely being seen in Europe. The deflation problems are being seen in the US, and everyone's looking at Abenomics, wondering if Japan's cracked the code on it. Japan is not. Everyone always seems to like the idea of there being a silver bullet, some sort of dramatic fix. But I think what's happened in Japan in the last 10 years, apart from the fact that while all the news has always been kind of negative about Japan, it's not been that bad. It certainly has been better than the 1990s. But what I appreciate about here is that, yes, while we've had all the Lehman shocks and the Credit Suisse collapses and so on, we've had all of the sort of economic ebbs and flows of other economies, it does feel like being here and looking out like it's been a bit more level here. And just by being level, I think Japan is doing better. So yeah, I think there's a lot of people looking at Japan and looking to learn from that. Quint Rankid, can you get the no-code program to write itself? I think you can. But the point is that at least for a time, when you get to super intelligence, which is hopefully not something that's going to happen in my lifetime, I think there's going to be a period for a good couple of decades where the AI will be good enough that it will be able to do whatever you can imagine, but what it will lack is the imagination. And what it means is that right now there is this bottleneck to startups, to companies on the internet, that there are tons of people with good ideas, but the ability to either execute the idea or to find someone to help them execute the idea right now is the bottleneck for a lot of people. I think, well, there is a paradox in a way that when something is too easy to do, in a way the challenge of doing something can actually foster creativity. But certainly I think it's going to be really interesting. It's a bit like YouTube, when to be able to create video content that was accessible to everyone, it wasn't much more than 20 years ago now. In fact, it wasn't 20 years ago. It was like 15 years ago before YouTube came out. There was really no way to create video content and have it seen by people. You'd have to get picked up by a TV network, or be resourceful enough to set up a pirate TV station or something like that. There are very few ways for people to create, or to try to create an indies movie, and then you'd have to get that funded and shown. The struggle that people had to go through to make video content that other people would watch until 15 years ago. And now anybody can do it. Now, of course, what happened when YouTube came out was you got a lot of crap, present company included. You got a lot of people crying in closets and under blankets, and you got a lot of terrible stuff with that democratization. But I think that there's no question. I mean, look, when I look around at my TV, and I look at my cable, and I look at my streaming services, and I look at YouTube, I tell you, I spend more time looking at YouTube. I think there is a better niche content that I want to watch, and I think the creativity, the number of people crossing over who are getting picked up and discovered through YouTube. I mean, there are bad cases, of course, like Justin Bieber, but there are good cases. Like I'm sure there are. It's kind of a thing now that people are sort of getting discovered through putting out successful, good content on YouTube first, and original content. There's an explosion of creativity, and I think you're going to get the same kind of accessibility that YouTube's given to video creation around things like developing software and developing, IT applications. In fact, it's very close to that. YouTube is, of course, just a wonderful platform for that, but I think you're going to get platforms for that are going to equally democratize other parts of the economy. I think legal advice is going to become like YouTube. I think tax advice. It does make, and again, that makes me slightly worried that there's going to be a flood of crap as well. But I think humanity is going to be better off. It's a good question. Will it be better off? But I'm sure that there'll be a lot more pearls and all of that. So that's where I'm still optimistic. National Foundation Day is in February. Thank you for the correction, Tokyo 503. Autumn equinox. That's right. There were flags flying, and I just thought, is it constitute? Well, here I am. I still don't understand the holidays. I definitely noticed Respect for the Aged Day, but thank you for the correction, Tokyo 503. Most holiday, I love this as well. I love to be Googled and corrected. I actually appreciate the corrections. With the most public holidays, India is number one. Well, there we go. Japan, 18 China, Hong 3 Kong, Thailand, Turkey, Pakistan, Japan. Okay. Number of holidays, 21 public holidays in India. It might have been the OECD or some measure like that, perhaps, that Japan had the most holidays, but that's good to know. Also, I've heard people talk about how Japan doesn't have vacations, but actually you get much better. You get 12 months maternity leave in Japan. So granted, people do not claim. There is a problem in every company I've ever worked of people not claiming their available vacations, and this is why there are so many public holidays. But yeah, it's actually pretty good for that if you can take it. Yes, anyway, I will continue. There's a thing down the bottom here in Japanese talking about, this is on Yahoo, talking about the sort of debate about whether Japanese names in the news, for example, Yoshihide Suga, the current prime minister, should he be Yoshihide Suga or Suga Yoshihide? just like Abe Shinzo Abe. The Ministry of the Culture Agency of Japan and the Abe government made a request to media last year that they asked that when covering Japanese people in English, but particularly politics, they said going forward, the Japanese naming convention is the same as Korea and China. In China and Korea and Japan, the customary way to say a name is surname first and first name, what we would say first name, given name second. The Western media follows this for Korea and China. When people talk about the chairman of China, I think they call him president. In fact, what is technically the right name? But everyone says Xi Jinping. They don't say Jinping Xi. Same with Korea, right? That's it's Moon Jae-in, I think, not Jae-in Moon. Yet in Japan, it's Shinzo Abe. Now, I think to me that reflects the history of Japan being more self-westernizing. They switched to the Western calendar faster, and they presented in first names. Also, but I've had this debate online about what it should be in English. My thought is this. I think that the rules on naming conventions should be language-based, not culture-based. The problem is if it's culture-based, then you need knowledge of that culture for all 200 countries in the world to be able to do it accurately. When it's in English, I think it's easy to say. In English, all names in all countries should be given name, surname. And if you're in Japanese, it should be the opposite way around. I think Japanese coverage of the US president should be Trump Donald. It should be Trump Donald, and if it's and if it's in English, call him Donald Trump. It does open up a whole bunch of problems. For example, if you do say, okay, when talking about Japanese people, say their last names first, well, then you get into this thing about what's a Japanese person. And what about me? I'm a permanent resident, but I'm not a Japanese person, so would they flip my name? And this is always where foreigners in Japan have Japanese people get confused when they have which is your first name and which is your given name, which is your surname, because they flip the name, but then they're not sure if it's really being flipped or which order you're saying it in. Are you saying it in their way or your way? It's one of those things that I still find annoying in Japan, that people don't know your proper name. What Yahoo pointed out was, in spite of the government requesting this, it hasn't really caught on. Nippon.com, a lot of the sources that I read, The Economist, Nippon.com, have switched to saying surname first, have given name last. But a lot of even Japanese, like for the Mainichi Shimbun, for the Yomiuri Shimbun's, for all of their English versions, as well as the Japan Times, they have not switched the naming convention. They've stuck with the English convention of given name first. And Western media as well has generally not followed this. Even though the Japanese government requested it. The Yahoo article speculates that part of that is just because it was coming out in the context of Abe's kind of nationalism and a perceived sort of nationalist, sort of isolationist trend of wanting to be treated specially, that everyone was kind of turned off by. I don't know. I still generally think logically, I mean, what if someone's half Japanese? What if someone's a permanent resident? What if someone is Japanese but they grew up overseas and they don't speak Japanese? Wouldn't it be weird to flip their name? I think it's better to stick with language-based rules, but there again, it's true that it's not unnatural for everybody to say Xi Jinping or Moon Jae-in. So why not Japan? Why treat Japan different to China and Korea, especially if they're asking to be treated the same? So I think from that perspective, I am actually open to the change. I still wonder, like Naomi Osaka, for example, Japanese person, Japanese citizen, Japanese mother, who's grown up outside of Japan and can speak basic Japanese. But would the news should they call her Osaka Naomi when that's not how she would think of herself? It is true that Suga Yoshihide probably thinks of himself as Suga Yoshihide, but it doesn't allow for grayness as well. So culture is a social construct. So interesting dilemma that I've had many debates about. Dub, you seem to assume it's a given name and a surname one way or the other. In some countries, it's a lot more complicated. Fair point, Dub. My point is, family name. Of course, there's some countries where people only have one name. There's some countries where people have like a dozen middle names. But yeah, for what we consider the family name, or the surname, the primary identifier. It actually makes logical sense if you think about it. If you're going through a phone book, you can't order a phone book. The way that we order names is illogical in English. It's like the way that Americans do dates. I mean, I understand doing day, month, year, or year, month, day. In New Zealand, we do day, month, year, and in Japan, they do month, year, day. And either way, well, actually, the Japanese way makes the most sense, because if you are using Excel, everything stacks in chronological order if you go year, month, day, but not the other way around. But how Americans ended up doing month, day, year. And then whenever I'm looking at numerical dates, I don't know if it's like June 4th or April 3rd or whatever, it's the same with names. You don't stack a phone book, give a name first. It's illogical, right? The family name is the most important name, and most countries, most cultures seem to prioritize the family name. Absolutely accepted that of the tens of thousands and hundreds of thousands of cultures on Earth, there's probably definitely a lot of more complications around that. But yes, thank you, Sergeant Pilko. I made a track this week, the first time in ages. I've gone back to the 10-minute challenge. I actually discovered that I could install some external instruments. When I say external instruments, actually software instruments that I could play through GarageBand, and I was playing around. So I did upload a track for the first time in ages. I am listening to a lot of music when I'm running. So yeah, check it out. My SoundCloud is there. And of course, if you are ever looking for music to put on anything, all of my music is free to use. You just have to credit me, but you can use it on your YouTube videos, on your feature film, on your TV commercial. I don't care. It's all got permissions and it's all downloadable. And of course, it's probably not that good, but I am having a lot of fun with it, and you're free to check it out. Japan is offering 2-year visas for aspiring student entrepreneurs. What about elderly entrepreneurs? This comes to my point earlier. I think it's great that they're doing this. And yeah, again, Japan has kind of been a bit self-delusional, I think. On the one hand, the government during the pandemic has been talking about, we need to set up visas to encourage professionals that want to leave Hong Kong and still work somewhere nearby and establish a hub in Japan. But at the same time, and this as well, they're setting up these 2-year visas for aspiring student entrepreneurs. But this is almost with did they even notice that they have actually prevented people who live in Japan? So they want people to come and live and work in Japan, yet people who live and work in Japan have been prevented returning to their homes by the government, more or less just out of a racist distinction. I mean, of course, it's fine for governments to distinguish the civil rights and liberties of citizens versus foreign residents. I don't expect all the rights of a Japanese person. I appreciate the rights that I have. I don't get to vote. That's sort of fine. And sure, I stand in a different queue at immigration at the airport. Again, I'm fine with that. But the idea of actually blocking people who legally are entitled to live in Japan from living with their families and entering the country in the same way the Japanese can, with testing and isolation, that they've been blocked from that for 6 months. And this has caused people to lose their homes, to be separated from their families, to lose their jobs, and the trauma that's engendered. And some countries have done that as well, of course, but a lot of countries have sort of recognized that residents are a different category to business travelers and tourists. And Japan has not done that, and so at the same time as it's basically ruining the lives of more than 100,000 people who live in Japan, who have been stranded outside of the country because they don't have Japanese citizenship, even though they live here. At the same time, they're talking about how to encourage more people to come and live and work in Japan. And if you do that, I mean, I'm here and I'm happy to be here, but there's a lot of people who have been really negatively affected by it and are pointing out. Obviously, Japan doesn't look as attractive as a place to set up your whole life when the country here clearly is clueless still about the idea of integrating foreigners into the society. That said, I think there are huge opportunities to be entrepreneurs here, as I talk about all the time. As you just saw, the online shopping gap, 15% have never shopped online. Elderly are not being economically not participating in the economy. I still think there's massive opportunities for entrepreneurs here in Japan if you want to come and take the chance here. But at the same time, doing this at a time when they're just rectifying the 6-month problem where they've basically put in forced isolation. They've actually shut out all of these residents of Japan is kind of a problem. Another valid discussion that's come up, again, this is from the Nikkei this week. Suga inherits a broken promise of Abe to empower Japan's women. On the upside, I talked a bit about this with the legacy of Abe, how he did promise to increase participation of women in the economy, and numerically he was correct about that. Takinaka Hazel Takinaka, the Koizumi's economic reform architect. The most important policy that Koizumi brought in, which was devised by Hazel Takinaka. Now I'm a bit put off. I always hear the name in Japanese, Takinaka Hazel. He was like the architect of Koizumi's economic policies, and what he did more than anything, it wasn't the sales tax and it wasn't spending or reform of government, it was the employment system. He introduced a parallel system to the lifetime employment system of working based on temporary contracts, basically contracts which could be up for up to 3 years. And the idea that the way that he sold it to the public was, he said, yeah, this is only intended for about 10% of the labor force, so that some companies can have flexibility, because there were all of these companies that were facing going out of business because they were not earning money because of the recession in the late 1990s in Japan, and they had these employees who were basically protected employees for life, and it was basically the weight of those pensions and those employees when the economies were failing were causing these companies to fail. And he pointed out, if the labor pool could move around, if people could if companies could let go of people more easily, that would allow labor to go into the parts of the economy where they're needed. Because this is it, while there are companies collapsing under the weight of their lifetime employed employees, there are other parts of the economy which still today are collapsing because they can't hire people. So he sold it saying that only 10% of people would be put under these sort of contracts, but that 10% would allow flexibility in the economy to allow it to sort of, grow and allow labor to move where it's needed. He's now admitted that that wasn't the plan. His plan was the way that it played out, which is that now something like 60% of all people employed in Japan are employed under these temporary contracts, which for a country that was sort of grounded in the security of lifetime insurance, I mean, it's basically a lifetime employment. That means that that you can buy a house, you can have a family, you can send your kids off to college, secure in the knowledge that you're going to get gradually increasing salary until you retire for your entire life. And you could even burn down the building, and I know of cases where people who are fired for criminal misconduct were still reinstated by the labor tribunal. So Japan's kind of moved away from that to a system that's much more like other Western countries, but at the same time people don't have the job security that they used to have. Why do I say that? I say that because where Abe has been successful at getting more women to come into the economy, most of the jobs that those women have come into are the least secure jobs, and they are the jobs that have suffered the most with the pandemic. And while there are still, in terms of the infrastructure sort of support for mothers to return to the economy, for example, through promoting childcare and so on, that still isn't really enough. It doesn't allow, a lot of women still don't feel like they can come back and work in companies full time. The groundwork isn't there for people to go and resume careers. What's happening is women are coming back into the economy, but as part-time workers. And they're still, and I think the quick fixes, the assumptions that, we just give them a daycare, they'll be able to, go back and work in the bank or do whatever, that's not materialized. So basically, while there are more women in the economy, they are sort of shifting into lower parts of the economy, lower earning and lower security than before. And again, this is a thing. It's the same with the elderly. You've got a problem with the economy that is has a lack of sufficient workers. This is where Japan's going to do really well with the AI economy, by the way, as well, because while other countries are worried about unemployment being caused by automation, Japan needs automation to be able to, just keep running because it's losing people. But in the meantime, you've got a lot of companies that are running out of business because of lack of people, and yet you've got all of these people that just aren't able to work for infrastructure reasons, elderly and women and so on. And I think it's I will credit Abe for making an effort and for setting the goals. The Democrats could have done this. You would expect that the Democrats would have done this, and they were more obsessed with fighting with each other than actually implementing policies that you would expect. And Abe came in, and this is something that you'd call, it's a common sense policy. It shouldn't be liberal or conservative, but it was something that, you wouldn't have expected from Abe, and he did. That said, he failed at it. Or at least it wasn't a complete success, and there's a lot to do. So it's a good call by the Nikkei again, thinking about the economy. Of course, you should just be doing it because it's the right thing, but forget about it being the right thing if you don't care about doing it for charitable reasons. It's economic common sense. It's like you're an idiot if you're not doing it. This was a big, the most interaction I've had on Twitter in years was talking about the top 5, the top family restaurants. I don't know if these were actually the top restaurants, but they all came out as family restaurants. This was on Nippon.com, but it came from a site called YOLO Japan. But yes, they had votes of the best, voted by foreigners, and many of these foreigners, by the way, were Filipinos and Chinese and so on. So it's the real pool of foreigners, not just expats. And this is what they voted for. I'm curious what people agree with and don't disagree with on this list. So when I saw Saizeriya come out top and Skia, I mean, these are cheap and they're good, but I wouldn't call them the best restaurants in Japan. I didn't even realize that Mr. Donut actually offered anything other than donuts, and yet it came up. So on the one hand, I looked at this, and especially when I saw Gusto at number 5. Gusto is one of the restaurants it's mostly reconstituted. It's like meat, but it's all reconstituted meat. There's a lot of really horrible things on here. There are things on here which I consider okay. Like, for my money, the thing about Saizeriya is it is affordable. It's all microwaved, but it is all pretty good. They've got a really good menu, and I'm okay with Saizeriya. I think most people are who vote for these or are attached to these will have fond memories of them from times when they got here as students or when they were working in remote locations. For me, Saizeriya was the only restaurant near a factory that I worked at my first job, and yeah, I quite liked it. Skia I haven't had very much. But yeah, it's okay. Mr. Donut, well, I don't mind a donut now and then, but I wouldn't even think of them as a restaurant to vote for. Sushiro I've been to once. Conveyor belt sushi, it is affordable and pretty good. That could be on the list. Gusto is just not good. Moss Burger is good, but it's overpriced, although Mime pointed out to me that they offer vegetarian burgers, soy meat burgers, not in all the restaurants, but in some of them, so that offers extra choices. Also, Koko Ichibanya, the curry place, also offers vegetarian curries, so that's another option there. I'm a big fan of Yoshinoya. Yoshinoya used to be a post-surfing place to go to. After surfing, get back to Kashiwa and go to Yoshinoya. Koko's, I get Koko's and Koko Ichibanya mixed up perhaps, but I think of Koko's as a curry place, and Kurasushi I don't know. But I must admit, I don't really consider these necessarily. These are very comfort food, soul food. These are all national chains, pretty much. But obviously, real prices, reasonable prices, and tastiness were the two main, and convenient location. It makes sense that these are the biggest factors, and that these being chains and being affordable and being mostly pretty good thing. Heavens Jonathan wasn't on here. Belongs with Gusto, but interesting. Anyway, I thought that so many people sharing their loves on here. Would love to see in the comments what people like out of this list themselves. This was funny. We are coming up to an hour. I'm going to power through, try to finish it quickly. Hey, Tasse Views, good to see you. And Jeremiah Kettner, did I say hello to you before? Don't know, but Clank Gun 72, good to see you. Good to see Jeremiah Kettner. Good to see all of you. That's funny, actually, that you haven't had that. But anyway, we all know about stories of parliamentarians being caught in Italy, and I understand in Indonesia and other countries being caught on live parliamentary broadcasts and committees, opening up tablets and smartphones and sneaking a look at some adult material. In Japan, this happened to the minister of the basically who's setting up the digitization agency to digitally reform all of government. He was sitting in a committee, and apparently, with the camera behind him, live streaming the session, he was seen looking on a large tablet at a video of a crocodile for 5 minutes, and he got caught out, that he should have been paying attention, should be representing the taxpayers, and he was in a cabinet looking at a video of a crocodile, and they asked him, why were you watching nature videos while you were why were you watching a crocodile video while you were in a cabinet session, a budget session? And he said, well, yeah, he said that there was like a link, and he wouldn't have clicked on it except that he really likes crocodiles. And so he wanted to look. I don't know. To me, I mean, heaven help me that I am actually liking some people in the government lately. I find this endearing myself. Of all the things that a politician could be caught looking at At least he looked at it on a tablet. I mean, remember the guy who preceded him, the minister of was it the IT minister who had never used a computer before, that we had before. I mean, this guy is on the iPad browsing crocodile videos. I'd say it's a big advancement. So yeah, him and Connell, who I'm about to get to, I think doing okay. If you are a newlywed couple with a combined income of less than 4.8 million yen, which is basically about like $45,000, which in a place like Tokyo, that's pretty hard to get by on. Outside of Tokyo, it's probably pretty common. If you're like if you're getting married like in your first year at a company though, well, for combined income, yeah, that's pretty rough. But I'm sure it happens. The government is going to give a wedding gift of 600,000 yen, which is about $5,000 US. I guess to promote the idea, given that people talk about that young couples are not having children because they can't afford to. Well, $5,000 is nice, but I don't know if you're like just married. I don't know. It's not going to help you. It might help you put a deposit on a house. It might help you take a honeymoon, but I don't know it's going to actually do much for the birth rate. But yeah, it still is better than nothing, and it is another kind of band-aid response to the problem of young couples not having children. Another story. This was awkward. I love Taiwan, and I think it's an international like travesty that is complicated. We've talked about it before. I know all the reasons that we don't recognize Taiwan as a country. Part of it is that Taiwan isn't really sure itself if it wants to be recognized as a country, but it is a country. Even whatever you say, it's 20 million people. It's got a big territory, it's got a big military, it's got a huge economy, it's an important country with a full sovereign government. But of course it's very tricky recognizing it. And Japan has good relations with it, even though, whether you can call it a country or treat it like a country is kind of tricky with the relationship with China. However, the former Prime Minister and head of the Olympics visited there and had a chat with so as a former Prime Minister, not currently in Parliament, had a chat with President Tsai. And told her that, I'll set up a call. He came out and he told the media that Prime Minister Suga of Japan was going to have a call with her, which was like, that's something that kind of prime ministers and national leaders can't do, because that would look like, that would really set China off the idea that Japan might be seen as a move to recognize, and it would be a significant change. So he kind of came out and stumbled out and said, we had a great time. Japan really loves Taiwan. In fact, I told her that the prime minister is going to give her a call soon. So China lost its shit, and I'm kind of like, well, screw you, China. Like, Taiwan exists, and the idea that you're going to intimidate the whole world into pretending they don't is ridiculous. But there again, it seems odd for a new Prime Minister of Japan, who's possibly about to have a summit with China, to do something as inflammatory to China as suddenly doing some sort of public recognition of the President of Taiwan. Japan has been good at keeping good relations with Taiwan without being, like, flashy about it. It turns out that was just the former Prime Minister talking out his ass. But the result of it was, because he was talking out of his ass, the Chinese government had to condemn Japan for it. And the Japanese government had to say, oh no, there were no plans about that. We have no plans to call the Prime Minister of the President of Taiwan. Which in the end, you have an outcome that's a lot worse than if he had said nothing. It would be great if the world would recognize Taiwan, if Taiwan sought recognition, and the whole world would recognize it. But that's not where we are. And the worst Prime Minister Japan has had the whole time that I've been here, Yoshiro Mori, coming out and stumbling into saying off the cuff that the Prime Minister is about to call her, causing a diplomatic crisis, and then forcing the Japanese government to say, no, we are never going to call Taiwan. What a mess anyway. So that's frustrating. Japan is going to be launching its own version of Jack Bauer 24. I don't know how it's going to work in a country where, like, even just seeing someone holding a gun is like weird. It should at least be like MacGyver, and it should involve 24 hours. I mean, you can have at least 2 of those hours are going to be involved on train commutes. At least 1 hour is going to be waiting by a fax machine. I don't know. I mean, how would you put together a Japanese 24? Tase views, weddings, they can cost a lot. I mean, that's a good point. Although the thing about weddings is that the guests pay for them. If you've attended a wedding in Japan, if you are, immediate family, you have to pay like $700 per person. If you are close friend of family, you have to pay like $500 per person. If you are just someone who is invited to help them get to the $35,000, you have to pay like $300, plus you have to bring a gift, which they have to return half of the price of. Yeah, financially, weddings are just a total nightmare in Japan. And you're right, a little cash bonus, it's better than a slap in the face, but it's not really going to have people pumping out babies. That was interesting. Suga called up Moon talking about how basically no good news is going to happen with Korea. There's not going to be a breakthrough on the war labor issue. Suga still thinks that Korea's basically breaking its treaty obligations to deal with war labor claims, which it's owed under the 1965 treaty that was kept secret from the people of Korea, but the government over there knows about. Whereas Moon still wants there to be a compromise where the Japanese government and Japanese companies agree to pay into a fund to be used as compensation for war laborers, which technically would be double dipping under the 1965 treaty, but he still wants to create something that looks like a win over Japan and forces Japan to apologize again. Tokyo doesn't want to go there. As a result, the relations are going to end up in the crapper. And I would have said 20 years ago, hey, why doesn't Japan just do it? It'd be a nice gesture, just apologize, just pay some money, try to do the right thing. I would have said that, and that does sound like the logical good thing to do. The thing is, Japan has done that multiple times with the comfort women issue and with other issues, and every time it's kind of gotten screwed over for more exploitation and more politicizing within Korea. The assurances that this was going to be well received and resolve these issues was always proved to be insincere. And this is why Japan is kind of shutting the door on this, and it's why this issue is not going to get resolved. And basically, Korea and Japan, I hate to say it, but I don't see anything happening. And the fact is that while it should be that Japan should do something about this, and doing something should be accepted by the Korean side, and that should see it resolved. The issue is, to me, not with the Japan side. I mean, the fact that they're doing nothing, you could say, makes them look bad right now. But I think it's like Charlie Brown kicking the football. Korea is never going to just allow Japan to kick the football on this. They're gonna keep playing it out, and it's a shame, because in the end of the day, the war laborers deserve compensation, and that compensation is held by the Korean government. It was paid to the Korean government by Japan in 1965, and the idea that they're being the Korean government doesn't want to support them because they want to force Japan to pay them, and Japan doesn't want to pay them because they think they've already paid for it. In the end of the day, it's the victims who are the ones getting screwed because of two countries fighting. That is the tragedy of the situation, even more than the tragedy that Japan and Korea should be friends and they're not. But I can deal with the politicians from each country not liking each other, but it's kind of a shame to see regular people get screwed over by this. I wish it could get resolved, but I'm not optimistic. There is the guy who has changed the labor system in Japan, which I just talked about before. That is me and JJ Walsh once a month now, talking about what the sustainable news once a month. So that was kind of fun. We did that this week. Go subscribe to her. 40 more subs and she gets 500, and she's really wanting to get there. And hell, it also means you'll be able to watch. We had a great chat. You can actually check out the live stream from September 25. And we're going to be doing it regularly from now on. Plus, she actually talks with a lot of interesting people about topics that are beyond just environmental stuff as well. So, it's a recommended channel. Japan is going to let more foreigners come back in. Finally, there's going to be still testing at both ends and isolation. Prefectures are a bit nervous about it. They're worried about the infrastructure to be able to handle it. But there you go. THIS views, yeah. In fact, I won't. I'll try to finish these out. I've talked in the past about how particularly Komeito only has 10% and LDP only has 14% female politicians in parliament. And some of those come in on the party list. One of the party list politicians for the LDP, however, among the very few women that there are in the party, they've picked out some people. As much as I think they should have forced quotas, they should have more women. They shouldn't just be picking anybody for these. And one of these people who's just been a constant source of embarrassment to the LDP is Sugita Mio Sugita, given name Mio, who in the past, for belittling LGBT people and so on, she's come out this week and talking about sexual assault, has said, yeah, women just make up stuff all the time. Um, true to form that she's just said women are basically liars and you can't trust them talking about sexual assault. Kind of astounding. I mean, where they found this person, I don't know. But it's kind of like she is the most vociferous anti-woman woman. She's the most anti-vociferous, vociferous anti-feminist member of the LDP, and she's a woman. So yeah, the greatest irony is that she came out today and said, "I didn't say that." But there again, she's saying that she didn't say that women like her lie all the time about everything. So, I don't know, there's kind of a circular, am I lying about lying or not? Who knows? Doob, is new immigration restarting? I was kind of going to move earlier this year and then the shit hit the fan. It is restarting for all countries. I think they're setting up now thinking of they're thinking about the Olympics, then they're thinking, so they're not phasing it in country by country and choosing which countries you can come from. They are allowing it from all countries, but there will be entrance limits based on the capacity of customs. So it's not totally clear how it's going to work, and the government still is setting things up, but they've announced that they will be allowing for all countries in the world for people not on tourist visas, but if you've got a non-tourist visa, like some sort of a working visa or a marriage visa or permanent residency like myself, you will be allowed to enter Japan starting from October, so from this week. The details are not clear yet, but that's a thing. Japan to offer $9,000 to remote workers in the countryside. What I was talking about in the beginning, I think this is a good thing. Obviously, what I also hope is that it's supported by the government, supporting the setup of infrastructure to allow working from the countryside, like fiber optic, T1 cables to every mountain, Unabomber lodge in Japan. But, it's a good thing, progress. Butter. The government has announced that they are reducing imports of butter by 30% because with apparently a lot of the butter being consumed in Japan was on cookies and baking for souvenirs for tourists, and with the tourist economy collapsing, they're not baking so much stuff, which means they don't need to import so much butter. Of course, again, this is based on a Soviet-style management of quotas where they're just trying to manage the supply, partly to protect the profits of Japanese dairy farmers and butter makers. And again, it's just ridiculous that they have quotas where they pre-import and stockpile and then distribute and ration. It's a Stalinist dairy product manufacturing system that I've talked about before. And they should just allow people to import as much as they need to import, or not import as much as they need to import. There shouldn't be this sort of the style of management is ridiculous. So they announced that the commissary is going to import 30% less. Hopefully it won't result in prices going up, but what can you do? Yes, Sergeant Bilko. So I'm already over time, so I'm not going to get angry about that. That's JJ Walsh. Everybody go follow her. The government, Taro Kono, announced he's the Minister of Regulatory Reform, and he has announced a war on Hankos, personal stamps that are used. I could have talked the whole hour about this, but I'm going to wrap it up on this. On personal seals that are used for different paperwork, which can be everything from executing contracts or establishing a bank account, like important legal documents, down to, yes, I've read it, like when a newspaper gets passed around an office, the uses that I used to see in the companies that I've done were, for example, when a newsletter was getting handed around, it would be printed out, there would be a cover sheet, and everyone would put their stamp on when they finished reading it and moved it on, just to confirm like they had seen it. There are so many redundant processes and bureaucracy in Japan that require, and the thing is, when you've got something that's a physical seal that's held by somebody that's required for the document, apart from the fact it's used redundantly, where you could just use an email, like for example, where if you want to apply for time off, here was an irony that if you wanted to apply for working from home because of the pandemic, you had to go into the office, put your stamp on the request, and get your manager to put the stamp on the request, and then submit it to HR. That would have to put their stamp on the request for it to be approved. Which means that you've got 3 people that need to get on trains, that need to chop down trees, that need to be in the same place during a pandemic, breathing on one another on this piece of paper to be able to work remotely to be safe from the pandemic. This kind of ironic situation happens throughout the economy, including in the bureaucracy. So the Minister for Regulatory Reform has said throughout the entire government, all central government ministries and agencies need to, within 1 month, cease all use of personal stamps. And if they can't, they have to explain to him why. He's also said once they're done with that, he's going to go for fax machines next. People should be using emails. They should just be emailing, getting permission by emails and stuff like that. They shouldn't be doing stuff on paper, and they shouldn't be putting stamps on it. They shouldn't be faxing it. It's kind of like there's a lot of skepticism on my Twitter when I shared this. Like, no, never going to happen. But I thought Japan could never have a tourist economy, and they developed one. So yeah, I could talk about this forever, but I'm liking Kono. He's doing dramatic, good, common sense stuff. We'll see how it goes, but I do like the direction of it. Naru, good to see you. Long time no see. Labor staff Japan welcomes return of foreign workers, although the foreign workers might not want to come back because you've been crapping all over them without realizing. But and that's it. That's all the topics. I said I had a lot of topics. I am 15 minutes over. What can we do? Death to the facts. Damn straight. Christopher Luke, good to see you all. I will let you go. Temiko, you must be like, wow, it must be like 4 o'clock in the morning there. Great to see you all. I thought there were actually lots of really interesting topics tonight. I could have done like 3 one-hour shows comfortably based on this. Just on that last topic, I could have talked comfortably for an hour. As you know, I can talk forever about all of these. Great to see all the comments and everybody in here. Thanks, as always, for watching. Remember, if you like the content, I always appreciate it if people leave a like on the video. Yeah, I'll be back here next week. Remember, if you want to keep up with me, you can follow me on Twitter. Go subscribe to JJ Walsh. Yeah, if you want to interact with me or catch up with me or whatever during the week, follow me on Twitter. And otherwise, I'll be back here at 10:30 p.m. Japan Standard Time next Sunday, as I am every week. And have a good Hankos. I should have said Hanko, personal stamp. Yes. Have a good week. Keep cool till after school. Kakite ano. Peace. Boom. Booyah. Thanks, everyone. Ending.